relationship, you got to ask yourself this question. How does that microbiome get along? And
Mhm.
not only get along in the different types of Shannon or alpha and beta diversity, how are those guilds getting along? Guild relationships are changing all over the gut from this hole all the way to the other hole. There's different relationships all the way down.
Doesn't all this talk about mechanism have to be verified or corroborated by functional outcomes? For
Well, I think
example,
that it does, but
disease.
mechanism's a red herring, Blake, in
Yeah.
a lot of this because
Ultimately, it's about
mechanisms.
outcomes. It's about functional
Right.
outcomes, right?
So you can take someone, you can put them on an ultra processed diet, you can put them on a whole foods diet, you do whole food versus UPF diets, you have outcome data right there. People get healthier, people get worse. There's your outcome data. It's already been done in 2019. That was the major NIH trial where they showed that people that ate ultra processed food consumed 503 calories more per day. 1 pound of additional energy per week, 3,500 calories.
Little
Calories,
change.
again, is a red herring, Blake. You can
It
have
is a
people,
red herring, but
you
I
can give
also
both
think
people 2,500 calories a day, and some will lose weight and some will gain weight. It
when
has to do with
that's
microbiome.
individual. That might be individual and not necessarily the food itself.
Well, all of this is, and keep in mind too. By the way, the guild, the person that came up with the
You
guild,
can't actually unpack the individual from the. They're
right,
indivisible,
right.
right? You can't. It's a coupled relationship.
It is, but also keep in mind the microbiome evolves much faster than the rest of us. The microbiome is the buffering evolutionary chain for putting something into our cells from the outside.
Correct.
So
And
it's a
we know now that the
dynamic relationship.
microbiome swaps genes.
Yep.
Genes from other species get
And so does the
swapped in to
obelisk.
make everybody either better or worse, depending upon what they're trying to accomplish.
Well, that's what they think
So
the obelisks are also doing because they've got gene switches and they're
They don't know what obelisks are really
yeah,
just
but
found
it's
last year. It's kind of a finding. They have no clue what they're doing.
except they did find the paper that just came out, they did find like there are gene switches and they are interacting with those gene switches, which means it's another added layer of complexity. They are almost
Hmm.
acting like I kind of see obelisks as eventually being almost like what an endocannabinoid is in our biochemical system internally. Like obelisk is like this carryover other piece that's almost a faster reactive in certain cases or a backup kind of bridging system, possibly. The way that I've read on some of the stuff coming out, as obscure as it is, if it has gene switches, I kind of look at it, it has to have that type of a role. But I don't know whether
So
it's
what
microbe to
type of gene
microbe.
switch? It's changed its own genes. I didn't think all genes very specific
It's
bacterial species.
that's what they don't know, whether it's going
Okay.
bacteria to virus to parasites to fungus to human cells or not. See, but the RNA, so it doesn't have a full gene. It's an RNA creature that they thought was just, trash pieces of RNA. But now they're seeing it has the ability for it, is what they're thinking, because of how it has been maneuvering and its targeting. So if that's so, that means we have another complex layer, just like in physics, where they go into smaller and smaller particles. We have another complex layer of active living something that for the first time they're saying we assumed only viruses were like that or something else was like that. Now we have living creatures that exist that have some functional form that they need to discover. And if it is RNA based, obviously it does have the ability to interact with DNA or genetics in some way. And that's where they're coming up with some conclusions. But I'm thinking, we didn't even know what cannabinoids were for the longest time, but then, it was discovered that they are some sort of a bioidentical bridging molecule with endocannabinoids. Maybe obelisks are in that fashion within our gut. That's how I kind of am thinking.
A lot of this discussion, about individual variability reminds me of the old nursery rhyme. Jack Sprat could eat no fat. His wife could eat no lean. And when you're out in public and you see a family together, the two parents and the couple kids, if one parent is super thin, oftentimes the other parent is not. They're all eating the same foods, right? They're eating together. And so like, why is that? Why is it that the mom and the dad might have different body compositions? Well, ultimately it's about that individual metabolism and maybe less about what they're eating.
Yeah, and then we're making the assumption your physical appearance gives us insight to physiology, and that generally speaking true, but we usually weight that more heavily on the obesity side than we do on the thin side. One of the greatest rising silent may have heard of this. I had never heard of it before. We have fatty liver disease, right? So MASLD is what it's called now, metabolic dysfunction associated, basically fatty liver disease. And this next condition, I just read a research report on this. It's more than all fatty liver disease, all diabetes, and all metabolic syndrome combined. You know what it is? Fatty pancreatic disease, FPD. Look it up. It will blow your mind. So I had no clue. I had no clue whatsoever. I looked it up and I was like, wow. And this also seems to be microbial influence, just like MASLD. Metabolic dysfunction associated, what's that S stand for? Associated liver disease. But really, it should be called the microbiome dysfunction associated liver disease. That's actually what it should be called, because when you dig into the data, liver disease is all about the microbiome. It's all about very specific taxa. And then you don't have to stop there. Gout, microbiome. Cancer responsiveness to chemotherapy, microbiome. Blood-brain barrier and different things, microbiome. Alzheimer's, microbiome. Alpha-synuclein seems to be protective. It's also under the influence of liquid-liquid phase separation. So to your point, I mean, we don't have the precise fidelity yet, but we're starting to understand that this is why medicine, I put it in the 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 category. Medicines work, I don't care what it is, herbs, pharmacy, whatever, works great for 1/3 of the population, kind of okay for 1/3 of the population, and shit for 1/3 of the population. Doesn't do anything. And so I'm wondering, Blake, if this is an intersectional illustration of what epigenes, genes, microbiome, and your lived environment are all doing at the same time. So your point, it's hard to unpack that data.
And that's what Dr. Bland has been focusing on with PLMI in his talks, because he's been really getting together all the metabolomic people, but really talking about the intersection of the microbiome in cellular metabolism and cellular immunity management, and how the microbiome immunity phase control and the microbiome's modulation after you get disease state is really the key to longevity and health. Right?
Well, the innate immune system is not static. It's reprogrammed throughout a lifetime. We were led to believe that once it's set, it's forget. It's not true in any way whatsoever.
Well,
it's definitely under dynamic influence of the microbiome in your environment.
And what you're saying makes a lot of sense. If you think about, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease is, so prevalent, and now we're talking about fatty pancreas. And then, heart disease is also deposition of fat in the arteries, and then circulatory peripheral arteries. All this is deposition of fat in our key organs. And where does that fat come from? Well, it comes from signaling from the gut and the absorption of energy from our food in the gut. Well, what facilitates that? Well, it's the microbiome. So, there's only about 3 or 4 degrees of separation between our food and microbiome, and deposition of fat clogging up, healthy function of all of our key organs.
And keep in mind too, so in the last 100 years, humans in general, especially in Western societies, have decreased their amount of activity and exercise, whereas we evolved to consume and use fats in a way as an energy store, because we didn't have the food available at all times and we had to work harder for it, having more activity and things. Losing both and then having access to too much food has now created this new dynamic where, yes, naturally fat is going to deposit everywhere, not just in one area or another. The other thing that ties into this, because of all the research I was doing on women's hormones last summer, especially for the onset of early perimenopause in Western societies, and how the hormone receptors are throughout the body, there's a tie-in, because especially in women, we don't know for men yet. We know that they're talking about what they're coining the androbolome, but with the estrobolone studies, what they did find is that after women enter menopause, the secondary estrogens, E2, E3, are primarily produced in fatty cells and a gland. But the fatty cells are all throughout the gut, which is why a lot of women entering menopause, the body naturally creates more fatty conditions to try to produce more estrogen around the organs that are no longer producing E1, right? And that completely ties in with the pancreas, the liver, and of course the kidney for being able to excrete.
Did your research take you down the micro angle too? Because there is a
Microbiome.
ton of estrogen that's produced by the microbiome.
Absolutely. Remember the
Phytoestrogens are converted, especially soy phytoestrogens, are far more efficiently converted to active estrogens in the Asian gut than they are in North American guts, like substantially more.
Yeah, I haven't gone through it by different demographics, but I definitely was aware of that. And I think one of the most detrimental things that happened to women in menopause in the United States, especially, is the anti-soy movement, because they need the soy more than ever.
Even for the protein and the phytoestrogens. I mean, there's a lot of things in there. Ultra-processed soy, high in carrageenan and soy milks, and I'm not a huge fan of those.
No.
Traditionally prepared whole food soys that are fermented and used as foods, I'm all for those.
Foods and tempes and things like that. That's what I was talking about. Or edamame, where I've tried to talk to some of the women I was coaching, and you wouldn't believe some of the things. They will not do soy whatsoever. I'm like, there is organic soy. No, you can't trust it. Okay.
Well, you know as well as I do that a lot of women suffer necessarily due to the HRT stuff, so that stuff was safe from the world, and a lot of women suffered unnecessarily as a result of that.
Yeah.
So,
but so much of what we're talking about, going back to the fat deposition thing, is, I've studied, obviously cells to function, they need inputs, and then obviously there's waste products that have to go out. And each cell has a fatty membrane, and so you have all this fat deposition clogging things, clogging the membranes, clogging inside. The lysozymes inside that are supposed to be breaking things down. Well, they're overwhelmed, and so it is. It becomes kind of clear when you think mechanistically that fat is really just clogging things up. And a lot of that comes from how we are overfed and all the calories and conversion of sugar to fat and everything. It's like, well, yeah, it almost makes a ton of sense when you think about dysfunction in the body related to the inability to excrete waste products out of the cell and into the excretion system. It really just makes a lot of sense to me.